So let's not be ashamed of Jesus. Let's not be ashamed to make the sign of the cross if we're saying grace before meals when we're out in the public. Let's not be ashamed to put a bumper sticker on our car that promotes relevant radio. Now, I'm not sure that's the same thing as not being ashamed of Jesus, but, when we get to the pearly gates, he'll say, what'd you do? Well, I had a bumper sticker on my car. Does that count for anything? Today, the church remembers the Korean martyrs, Andrew Kim Tai-gon, who was a priest, Paul Chong Ha-sang and his companions, 103 of them. Just curious, has anyone here ever been to Korea? Okay, there's 25 of us here. We've never been to Korea. Those who are listening and watching, you could raise your hands, but I can't see. I think most of us in the United States have never been there. It's so far away. It's a different language. It's a different continent. And it's amazing that it's part of the Catholic Church. Christianity came to Korea in the year 1592. What were you doing in the year 1592? The Pilgrims hadn't even arrived in the United States in 1592. There were Spanish explorers in Central America and South America, and from there they went to Asia, and that's a long time ago. Now, what was it like to travel in 1592? Could you get an Uber? You couldn't get an Uber. Could you drive a car? You couldn't drive a car. Could you fly a plane? You couldn't fly a plane. You had to travel over the sea in a ship, which was powered by wind. And that might seem very romantic and all that, but it was extremely dangerous. Because if the wind didn't blow, you were stuck. And people died of scurvy because they didn't know that you were supposed to eat oranges or Liz's lunch every day, right? All sorts of things are happening. And what's really fascinating, that the mariners could calculate latitude. That's how far north and south you were by looking at the stars. But they couldn't calculate longitude precisely. So I always had to drop these weights into the water to see how shallow the water was. So often there were shipwrecks. It was dangerous business to sail around the world. So what kind of imagination and courage did these missionaries have back then? I mean, it was just amazing. They were taken by the words of Christ. Go out into the whole world. And they had globes. They knew the world was round. And make disciples of all nations. Well, how are we going to do that? I can't speak Korean. I don't know how to use chopsticks. Well, you're going to have to learn, right, to get into that culture. It's really quite fascinating. And so very similar to Japan, Korea had Christianity at the beginning, and then the missionaries were thrown out, and there were no priests for hundreds of years. And when missionaries finally came back, they found 100,000 Koreans who were Catholics. They passed on the faith. They did have two sacraments. Do you remember which ones? Baptism and matrimony. They couldn't have the Holy Eucharist or confession or anointing of the sick or things like that, but they passed it on, just as they did in Japan. I remember when St. John Paul the Great canonized the martyrs of Korea in 1984. I was a young man then, I was like 25 years old, and there was a picture of the stadium and the millions of people there. I was saying, this is fascinating. This is fascinating. Maybe one day we will go there. So the martyrs that we remember today with great gratitude for their witness were martyred between 1839 and 1867. So that was, less than 200 years ago, time of our Civil War. And finally, Korea granted freedom of religion in 1883. And there are many, many Christians and Catholics in South Korea today. And I don't know about North Korea, but it's the challenge of evangelization. One of the benefits we have at Relevant Radio in our mission of evangelization through the media is that through the internet, we can reach Southeast Asia. And did you know that 2/3 of the world's population lives in Southeast Asia? 2/3. That includes India and China and all the rest, 2/3. And 2/3 of the world's population is under age 37. It's a young, vibrant population, and it's very connected to the internet, and we know that they follow us on the internet. And so in today's gospel, Jesus is speaking words that should be in the hearts of all who want to be missionaries and evangelists. If anyone wishes to come after me, that's a big if, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. There are 3 steps, and they are all based on deliberate choice. He must deny himself, he or she, as the case may be. Take up the cross and follow me. And so following Christ begins with this moment here of self-denial. And there are many, many ways we can live out that self-denial. I'll just focus on one suggestion today, and that's very biblical. It goes back to the Old Testament. Let's all get in the habit of tithing to the church or to charity. But, whatever we make, give a little bit, 10% to help others. And it always comes back. I mean, at least that's what Drew says on the Drew Mariani Show. It always comes back. And we've seen that here at Relevant Radio time and time again. What a fascinating history of the church. These heroes, these courageous people who loved God more than they loved their own life. And it comes true once again that the blood of martyrs is the seed of Christians.